없이 쏟아지는 포토 스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Coming up on Arirang News, North Korea and Russia will pay a price for any military cooperation. This at a deterrence talk between South Korea and the U.S. in Seoul, calling Russia to act responsibly as a permanent UNSC member. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un wraps up his visit at Khabarovsk by visiting a fighter jet plant, while Kim and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin are likely to meet again soon, next time in North Korea. Putin, meanwhile, says Russia will not violate any agreement related to the situation on the Korean Peninsula. South Korea signs an agreement with Ukraine to provide assistance for the war-torn nation, particularly on reconstruction projects, including railroads, airports, and dams. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with stern warnings coming from both the Foreign and Defense Ministry officials of South Korea and the U.S. following the rare Kim-Putin summit. After deterrence talks in Seoul, they've agreed that military cooperation between North Korea and Russia is a serious violation of UNSC resolutions, and the two will pay a price should that happen. Our foreign affairs correspondent, Bae-eun-ji, leads us off.
Just days after the leaders of North Korea and Russia met, vice ministerial level officials from the Yoon and Biden administration sat down for talks at Seoul's foreign ministry on Friday. During a joint press briefing following the 5-hour-long meeting of the Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consultation Group, First Vice Foreign Minister Chang said South Korea and the U.S. agreed to closely cooperate on ensuring Pyongyang and Moscow pay a price for military cooperation.
We have agreed that military cooperation between Russia and North Korea is a serious violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and that Russia needs to play a responsible role as a permanent member of the Security Council.
Vice Defense Minister Shin Bum-chul said the officials will visit a naval base following their meeting to see the South Korean warship, the Cheonan, that was sunk in a North Korean torpedo attack in 2010, killing 46 sailors. Shin added that they also plan to inspect a new namesake, Cheonan warship, reborn as a new state-of-the-art frigate 11 years after the sinking.
By boarding the new ROK-U.S. Cheonan, we will be able to demonstrate our extended deterrence against North Korea.
At the joint briefing, U.S. Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security, Bonnie Jenkins, said Friday's meeting demonstrates Washington's strong security commitment towards South Korea, and stressed that a nuclear attack by Pyongyang would be unacceptable.
The United States reaffirms that any nuclear attack by the DPRK against the United States or its allies and partners, including the ROK, would be unacceptable and would result in the end of that regime.
Meanwhile, Acting Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Sasha Baker, noted that the recent port visit of a nuclear submarine, the USS Kentucky, further demonstrated evidence of the strength of the two countries' alliance.
The United States will stand firm in its extended deterrence commitment to the ROK, which includes the full range of U.S. defense capabilities, including nuclear, conventional, and missile defense capabilities.
This was the fourth meeting of the EDSCG, which is a gathering of the two countries' vice ministerial defense and foreign affairs officials. This is the first time the event has been held in Seoul, as the previous 3 meetings were held in Washington. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin says Russia will not violate any agreement made regarding the situation on the Korean Peninsula. This was said during Friday's meeting in Sochi, Russia, with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. During his summit with Kim Jong-un earlier in the week, Putin had hinted at the possibility of military cooperation with North Korea. This has sparked concerns that Russia would violate UN Security Council resolutions. But he also denied rising claims that North Korean troops could be deployed in the war in Ukraine, calling them nonsense. The Belarusian leader reportedly proposed trilateral cooperation with Russia and North Korea. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un wraps up his visit at Khabarovsk by visiting a fighter jet plant and is reportedly heading to Vladivostok. Kim and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin are likely to meet again soon, next time in North Korea. Our Choi Min-jung reports.
Kim Jong-un has reportedly wrapped up his visit to an aircraft production plant in Khabarovsk and is now headed to his next destination. Russia's news agency on Friday reported that Kim looked around the country's biggest aviation manufacturing plant and watched the final assembly process of the Sukhoi Su-35 and Su-57 multi-purpose fighters and the new Sukhoi Superjet 100 passenger aircraft. He also observed a Su-35 test flight. He was accompanied by Russia's Minister of Industry and Trade, who hinted at the possibility of cooperating with North Korea in aircraft production. Kim appeared to have left the production plant at around 2:30 p.m. local time. His next stop is expected to be Vladivostok. He's anticipated to arrive there on Saturday at noon and meet with Russia's defense minister. He's also likely to tour the Pacific Fleet and Far Eastern Federal University before departing to North Korea late at night. But there is also speculation that Kim could stay for a few days longer than planned. Although his trip is coming to an end, Kim and Putin could possibly meet again soon, as the Kremlin on Thursday said that the Russian leader accepted Kim's invitation to visit the North with pleasure. South Korea's unification ministry sees the possibility as well.
We believe there is a possibility that Putin will visit North Korea because there has been an official announcement from the Russian government.
During the leaders' first summit in 2019, Kim had also invited Putin to North Korea, but an official announcement nor a visit was made by the Russian leader. However, as there was an official acceptance announced by the Kremlin, pundits say that it's more likely that Putin will visit this time around. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Speaking at an event commemorating the 73rd anniversary of the Incheon landing operation during the Korean War, South Korean President Yoon doubled down on the importance of peace through strength and defending democracy while taking aim at what he calls communist forces. Our Kim Do-young reports.
South Korea's Navy and Marines staged a landing operation on Friday to commemorate Operation Chromite's 73rd anniversary. 3,300 soldiers on board 20 ships and dozens of other vehicles at the nation's western port city of Incheon demonstrated what happened 73 years ago when UN forces made a surprise attack here to turn the tide during the Korean War. Watching this on a landing ship Tank 689 was the commander-in-chief himself. This is the first time a sitting South Korean president has joined the ceremony, which first started in 1960. President Yoon said what was fought and won back then is under threat again now.
공산 세력과 그 추종 세력, 반국가 세력들은 허위 조작과 선전 선동으로 우리의 자유민주주의를 위협하고 있습니다. 정부는 참전 용사들의 희생으로 이룩한 승리를 기억하고 계승하여 어떠한 위협도 결연하게 물리칠 것입니다.
Yoon added that peace, freedom, and democracy will be kept through strong security, an overwhelming power to respond to North Korea's threats. This will center around the ROK-U.S. alliance with cooperation with other friendly nations that have shared values. Meanwhile, at the ceremony were foreign veterans who participated in the operation. Vincent Sordello, a 91-year-old U.S. Marine veteran, Alfred Kim, a 94-year-old U.S. Navy veteran, and Ronald Foyle, an 89-year-old Canadian Navy veteran, were among them. Yoon said the operation had a success possibility of 1 out of 5,000, and it was historical in that stopped the Korean Peninsula from completely falling under a communist regime.
인천 상륙작전 기념일이 공산 침략에 맞서 우리 국군과 유엔군들이 보여준 불굴의 용기와 투지, 희생 정신을 기억하고 세계 시민이 평화와 번영의 미래를 노래하는 국제적인 행사로 승화되기를 바랍니다.
Meanwhile, other nations joined in the celebration. USS America, an amphibious assault ship capable of holding 20 F-35Bs, and Canadian Royal Navy's HMCS Vancouver came too. On one of the ships, 1,300 civilians and model soldiers were invited to enjoy the replay of the operation. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea signs an agreement with Ukraine to provide assistance for the war-torn nation, particularly on reconstruction projects including railroads, airports, and dams. Our Lee Soo-jin has more.
South Korea is speeding up efforts to assist in Ukraine's reconstruction. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport revealed on Friday that Minister Won had led a delegation made up of representatives from both the government and the private sector on a visit to Kyiv. The visit, which lasted 2 days starting Wednesday, comes just 2 months after President Yoon met with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in a surprise visit to the country in July. Minister Won emphasized that this week's visit to Ukraine was to accelerate reconstruction efforts that were discussed during the July visit. The delegation met with President Zelensky on Wednesday, where he expressed his gratitude for President Yoon's pledge made during his G20 summit speech last Sunday to provide $2.3 billion in financial assistance via South Korea's Economic Development Cooperation Fund. During the same meeting, Won and Zelensky officially signed an agreement that will be the first step in providing long-term, low-interest loans through the EDCF. The EDCF was established by the government to provide long-term, low-interest loans to developing countries for their economic and industrial development. This is in addition to South Korea's $300 million humanitarian aid package for Ukraine. The Korean delegation and the Ukrainian government also held a forum where they announced 6 infrastructure projects that the two governments will cooperate on. The 6 are establishing a smart transportation system in Kyiv, developing a smart city in Yoon, modernizing the Borispol International Airport, establishing sewage treatment facilities in Bucha, assisting in the reconstruction of the Kakhovka Dam, and developing a high-speed railway network. For the smart transportation system, the state-owned Korea Overseas Infrastructure and Urban Development Corporation plans to rebuild a smart and low-carbon transportation network to replace facilities in Kyiv that were damaged by the war. Representatives from private South Korean companies also made presentations on smart cities, dams, factory plants, modular houses, and construction machinery during the forum. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea's inflation has been easing since the beginning of the year, but amid the rising global oil prices, the consumer prices in August increased at a faster than expected pace. The authorities say this is likely to stabilize in the weeks to come. Our An Sung-jin explains.
Despite a relative slowdown this year, consumer prices in South Korea remain unstable amid continuing external uncertainties. According to the Finance Ministry on Friday, consumer prices in August saw an on-year increase of 3.4%. This indicates improvement from January of this year, when the on-year increase was 5.2%. Though the inflation rate has been dropping on a monthly comparison, the rise in prices for energy and agricultural products has pushed last month's figure back up from 2.3% in July. Oil prices rose as Russia and Saudi Arabia extended their oil production cuts through the end of this year, while expectations that there will be no further interest rate hikes in the U.S. through the end of 2023 also attributed to climbing oil prices. These factors took their toll on domestic oil prices, which jumped 11% on year. Despite global volatile factors that affect consumer prices, the inflation increases are expected to further slow down, as improvement in consumer sentiment and semiconductor exports provide some optimism.
The value of semiconductor exports for the first 10 days of September was at the highest level on a daily average compared to the first 10 days from January to August this year. This points to the fact that the semiconductor sector is recovering as the value is steadily increasing every month.
At a government meeting on Friday, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho emphasized that since core inflation, which excludes these volatile components, is rather stable, the overall inflation for October is set to stabilize. However, he also added that as concerns over soaring oil prices remain, caution is necessary.
The fuel tax cut has been extended until October in response to the recent volatility of international oil prices, and we will consider additional extensions depending on future international oil price trends.
The government stated that it will do all it can to ease price pressures through the use of necessary measures. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea and Africa were able to reaffirm their economic partnership during the 4-day COAFEC ministerial conference held in South Korea's southern port city of Busan, and are now working to further develop cooperation ahead of a summit next year. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young spoke with the president of the African Development Bank.
The passion and commitment for economic ties between South Korea and Africa couldn't be halted by the COVID-19 pandemic. That's what President Akinwumi Adesina of the African Development Bank said during an interview at the Korea-Africa Economic Cooperation Ministerial Conference, a biennial event held for the first time in 5 years due to the pandemic.
The Korean government has subsequently supported us in the replenishment of the African Development Fund, which is a concessional financing window of the bank, and the Korean government provided us $108 million, and that is the highest they've ever given since they joined the fund in 1980.
Feed Africa being a part of the bank's agenda known as the High Fives, President Adesina has been emphasizing Africa's food self-sufficiency. Africa has 65% of the world's remaining uncultivated arable land that will have the potential to feed up to 9 billion people worldwide by 2050, meaning what Africa does with agriculture will determine the future of food around the globe. South Korea is supporting this by sharing its rice production technology with its counterparts in Africa.
And I'm very excited about the Korean Rice Belt initiative, in which the Korean government is providing high-yielding varieties, agronomic practices, and other types of technical support to 8 African countries to be able to produce rice. Africa imports about $6 billion of rice every year, so if we're able to produce a lot of rice, we can conserve foreign exchange and also make sure that we create a lot of jobs in rural areas.
The bank has also been putting efforts behind green growth for Africa. Along with adaptation to climate change and renewable energy generation, metals used in electric mobility have become crucial to go green, as Africa has vast amounts of the minerals and ores that are needed for batteries.
And I want to see companies from Korea investing in Africa in lithium-ion battery manufacturing in Africa, but also making electric vehicles in Africa. And in fact, I want to tell you one thing that's quite exciting is that to manufacture lithium-ion batteries, precursor batteries in Africa is 3 times cheaper than manufacturing it in China or in the United States. So if there's a place to be, that's it.
Areas including energy transition and agriculture are expected to see further development at the next South Korea-Africa Summit.
Korea-Africa Energy Investment Framework, which is actually a co-financing facility that is providing $600 million of co-financing with the African Development Bank, will go a long way in helping us towards that. So I'm hoping that for the Korea-Africa Summit next year, we'll be able to show to the heads of state how we are scaling up together renewable energy in Africa.
To mobilize more resources for Africa's development, he is also hoping to work with South Korea regarding the reallocation of the special drawing rights to Africa that the IMF implemented worldwide in 2021. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News, Busan.
BTS member V has sold over 2.1 million copies of his first solo album, Layover, in the first week of its release. His agency, Big Hit Music, announced on Friday that V has become a double million seller and that this is the highest first week sales figure for a solo K-pop artist in history. He now holds the record of being the first artist to surpass 2 million sales as a solo artist and also as a member of a group. The solo records of BTS members are performing well, with Face by Jimin selling 1.45 million copies and Suga's D-Day selling 1.28 million. On the culture front, there's a lot to look forward to through the rest of the year, especially in terms of classical music. In fact, there's one exciting performance coming up this very weekend. Two classical music giants, conductor Chang and cellist Mischa Maisky, are performing together here in Korea for the first time in over a decade. And what makes their performance even more special is their decades-long relationship. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin has their story.
They say behind a successful student, there is a great teacher, like cellist Chang and Mischa Maisky. Chang serves as the artistic director and chief conductor of Norway's Trondheim Symphony Orchestra and Opera, while Maisky is the only person to have studied under both the legendary cellist Mstislav Rostropovich and Gregor Piatigorsky. He's also the second cellist ever to receive the Most Outstanding Foreign Musician title from the Academy of Santa Cecilia, one of the world's oldest music institutions. The two are performing together in Korea for the first time in 11 years. But their story dates back even further to 1992. Maisky invited Chang to his masterclass in Siena after seeing a video of her playing the cello.
That's when I realized that a musician is the one who brings music to life. And sheet music is not just notes on paper, it holds the composer's spirit. Mr. Maisky made me see that notes are not everything to music.
In 1994, Chang made her debut as a professional musician by clinching the grand prize at the prestigious Rostropovich International Cello Competition. Her interests eventually expanded to conducting, and since 2007, she has been working as a conductor. Throughout these years, Maisky has remained her biggest supporter, calling her his one and only student.
She loves and enjoys what she's doing, and on the other hand, of course, it's kind of a pity that she had to sacrifice, in a way, her fantastic cello career. I respect her decision and totally support her.
This time, Chang and Maisky are playing the works of Dvorak and Beethoven, composers who hold special places in Chang's heart.
Mr. Maisky showed me what it means to be a musician. I played a Dvorak piece at the Rostropovich International Cello Competition. And Beethoven is the one who made me want to dive into the world of composing.
So this literally little girl, a young child, transformed into something completely inexplicable, unimaginable, and my feeling remained the same. I'm always, every time we have a chance to be on stage together, it's just really very, very special.
An extraordinary reunion of a teacher and a student, bound by their love for music. 송유진, Arirang News.
The Gwangju metropolitan government invited Latin American media officials to the city on September 13th to show them its culture and business opportunities. The media officials visited the Gwangju Content Cube to see how the city creates its own cultural content. They also visited the Asia Content and Entertainment Fair, the biggest content exhibition in South Korea, from the 14th to the 17th at the city's Kim Dae-jung Convention Center. The fair had representatives from 33 countries, not just from Latin America, but also from the United States, China, Germany, and Italy. It featured 400 content companies showcasing their offerings in 510 booths and included demonstrations and conferences related to broadcasting, video, animation, characters, and digital content.
A rainy weekend is on the cards for the entire nation. An umbrella will be a must, so make sure to plan accordingly. This weekend, Seoul will be warmer than the seasonal average at 26 to 27 degrees Celsius. As for the amount of rainfall, eastern Gangwon-do, Chungcheong-do provinces and the south coast will see up to 120. Parts of the Seoul metropolitan area and southern regions will see 30 to 80 millimeters. Keep in mind that local downpours of 20 to 40 millimeters per hour may batter some regions. For those across low-lying areas such as rivers and valleys, please take extra precautions beforehand. Morning temperatures in Seoul and Gwangju will be starting off at 22 degrees. With the cold showers, daytime highs won't be rising too much. Seoul will peak at 26 degrees, Daejeon 27. Gwangju and Busan will be making it to 29 degrees. And next Tuesday, the Seoul metropolitan area will see another round of showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this Friday night newscast. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a good weekend and a good night.
I'm live! 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지 펜션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고